Episode 7, all the kids are in Hopper's cabin trying to make sense of everything, and they come to the conclusion that Billy has built an army solely to defeat 11. With the fireworks going off from the 4th of July, they hear a noise outside that doesn't sound like fireworks, so they travel outside of the cabin, and that's when they see the Mind Flayer standing there. They start grabbing weapons to hunker down and just wait for him to attack. They don't have to wait long because it busts through and goes right after 11, but Jonathan starts hacking away at it with an axe. That's when it goes after Jonathan, so Nancy starts shooting it with a shotgun. Then it tries to go after Nancy, and that's when Elle uses her powers to kind of destroy the one arm of it. But another arm pops through, and another arm pops through, and she's trying to hold them off as long as she can. She's able to take both of them out, but when she lets her guard down for a split second, the Mind Flayer busts through the ceiling and grabs her. The kids act quick, however, and start trying to pull her back in, but the Mind Flayer's got a pretty tight grip on her leg. That's when Lucas grabs the axe and starts trying to hack it away at it. After a few whacks, Elle is set free, and that's when she snaps, literally tearing it in half. Now, the Mind Flayer isn't dead, but it is injured, and so is Elle, who drops to the floor because her leg is pretty messed up. So the kids head to a pharmacy to get her patched up, but we'll get back to them in a little bit. Because you've got Erica, Steve, Robin, and Dustin, who are finally able to escape thanks to the key card. But as soon as they get out of the mall, there are guards looking for them, so they have to retreat back into the mall. Dustin ends up sneaking them into a screening of Back to the Future. He sits a still drugged Robin and Steve in 2 seats, and far down the same aisle, he sticks Erica and says, look, keep an eye on them. I'm going to try to go get help to get out of here. So Dustin heads up to the highest place in the mall, the projector room, and starts trying to radio his friends for help. His friends have now arrived at the pharmacy to try to get 11 all patched up. Unfortunately for them, pharmacies aren't like today where they're open 24/7, so they just had to break in. So Max, having dealt with a lot of injuries herself skateboarding, is tasked with healing up 11, and the rest of the group kind of just walks around the pharmacy trying to make sense of this all and also trying to formulate a plan, but they realize they really need 11. But Lucas, however, has a great plan because they have a killer fireworks display, and he finds one really, really big firework, and he says, if you have like 5 of these things, it's basically a stick of dynamite. Now, Max just laughs this plan off because she doesn't think it's a serious plan, but she'll learn. You've also got Mike trying to tell 11 that he loves her in the most awkward way possible, and when he kind of gets to that point, that's when he hears the radio go off from Dustin saying it's a code red. Now, the issue is you can't really understand Dustin on the radio because he's running out of batteries. So he's trying to alert his friends of the issues with the Russians and infiltrated Hawkins, but they can't understand him. So he runs back down to Erica, who's sitting in the movies, and asks, hey, do you have batteries? And she's like, no, why would I have batteries? He goes, I always have batteries. She goes, well, then what's the problem? He goes, I don't have enough of them, and they can't hear us. But he's got a bigger issue because Steve and Robin have just disappeared, and they're walking around the mall, and all of a sudden they start tripping out and realize, we should probably try throwing up these drugs. They rush to the bathroom and throw them up and then have a test to see if they're still under the influence of truth serum. Robin asks Steve, hey, have you ever been in love? And he says, yeah, Nancy Wheeler. She asks, are you still in love with her? And he says, no, now I've got a new girl. And he starts describing Robin in great detail, but there's a slight issue. Robin's gay. She was obsessed with Steve Harrington because Steve Harrington was the desire of a girl in that class who Robin had a crush on. Shortly after this, Dustin arrives, pretty pissed off that they left, and says, let's go. The movie's letting out. We'll just blend in with that crowd. Now, lucky for them, Mike did not give up just because he couldn't understand Dustin. 11 used her powers to realize they're at the mall. So they all head to the mall to help out Dustin with whatever thing he needs help with. All they knew was it was a code red. And shortly after they leave the pharmacy, Billy shows up. So Billy is on their trail. It is worth mentioning that at one point, Billy looks down at the bloody rags that were used to patch up 11, and they start moving in that slime-like way from the Mind Flayer. So this wasn't just like a normal bite. Now, one group that we haven't talked about yet is Joyce, Hopper, the investigative journalist, and their Russian friend Alexei/Smirnov. They're driving back to Hawkins, praying to God that the government meets them there. And Joyce and Hopper start bickering, and they've been bickering since Joyce stood him up for that date. And finally, the investigative journalist says, all right, this was cute at first, but enough. You guys just need to have sex. They laugh that off, but everybody in the car knows, yeah, it's probably true. Luckily, the awkwardness doesn't last too long in that car because they do end up arriving back in Hawkins, where everyone's basically at that 4th of July fair. They head to the fair looking for their kids, but they don't find their kids. It's kind of the other way around. They've been found. The mayor sees Joyce and Hopper walking around, and he alerts that Russian Terminator guy, hey, I found him. So Hopper and Joyce are walking around, and Alexei and the investigative journalist are kind of just standing there, and Alexei says, hey, so after I help you guys, I get citizenship, and then I can enjoy the fun, right? And the investigative journalist says, man, we can enjoy the fun right now. He gets him some game tickets, and the investigative journalist heads off to get some food. And Alexei does well at these carnival games. He ends up winning a prize, but as he's walking back and he shows the investigative journalist from a distance, hey, look what I won, the Russian Terminator comes out of nowhere and shoots him with a silencer and just keeps walking. The investigative journalist saw this all go down, so he rushes to grab Alexei and then also rushes to find Hopper and Joyce to let them know they got Alexei. Hopper ends up eluding the Russians, sneaking into a fun house. He takes a few of them out, grabs one of their guns, and ends up shooting the Russian Terminator guy. Unfortunately for Hopper, the Russian Terminator guy was wearing a bulletproof vest, so while he's injured, he's not dead. And Joyce, the investigative journalist, and Hopper are able to escape, but unfortunately, they did lose Alexei. Luckily, however, he did alert them how to turn off the machine, exactly where they need to go and all the details. So his death was not in vain. Hopper was also able to grab a radio from one of the Russians, so they're listening to the communication, and they hear them say, we found the kids in the mall. They don't know which kids, but they're heading to the mall because they assume it's got to be our kids. And they would be right. Kind of. Erica, Dustin, Steve, and Robin were trapped in the mall, and they're basically surrounded by these Russians who caught them trying to leave the movie theater. And at this point, they have nowhere to go. That is until all of a sudden, one of the display cars you tend to see in some malls sometimes starts beeping and then gets picked up and thrown and takes out all of the soldiers. And then you look up and 11 and the rest of the group have arrived to save them. Both groups end up meeting in the middle and exchanging pleasantries. Oh, we were doing this. Oh, you guys are doing that. That's cool. But all of a sudden, 11 just collapses to the ground because her leg is really messed up. And when I say messed up, there's something moving in there. So the Mind Flayer is basically in 11. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel. If you do not see the next video up in one of the end screens, not to worry, it'll be up in the next couple days. But the most important thing is that you like and subscribe and all that good stuff.